I'm sure many of you will have heard of the ending. The Mafia Princess, Marisa Merico.
The finger, you do the thing with the blood. It's totally different. When you're born into it, it's so different.
How does your mother in Blackpool end up with the Godfathers?
She would turn around and say, right, he's done that, kill him.
While she's making the pasta.
Yeah. When you've got a lot of money coming in to the point where you've got a money machine, who do you trust? I'm talking about AK-47 bazookas. We sent them down, I took them down. Helicopters, there's all this trying to find him, and he's sat there eating in this restaurant. We used this coach with legitimate people going on holiday. And this coach is full of cannabis. 2 IRA, Brighton bombers, Mary Hindley, Rose West. I was inside with them.
I know it's a bit cheeky, but do you think you might be able to convince your dad to come on and talk to us?
If you make him an offer, he can't refuse.
Yeah, I'll always make him an offer. Tell him Big Terry's going to call him for a sit down.
So I want to say a big thank you to all their sponsors for making this podcast happen. Without you, we wouldn't be here. Stargaze Entertainment, thank you so much. These guys are hosting celebrity events up and down the country, giving you the opportunity to get up close and personal with your favourite celebrities. Sure Pure CBD, your natural path to wellness and balance. Dream Mentoring for all your mentoring needs. If you need some positivity in your life, Tom Smith is the man. And finally, to Carson & Kay Solicitors, the UK's leading criminal law firm, to help get you out of any tricky situations you may find yourself in after watching this podcast. To find out more about any of their sponsors, click on the links in the description below.
Welcome back to the Criminal Connection. We've got an extra special guest today. She's been billed as a Mafia Princess. I'm sure many of you will have heard of the ending. The Italian mafia crime family. They are the #1 Italian mafia crime family in the world. The rumour is they turn over £30 billion a year, and 85% of all cocaine that comes through Europe is basically down to them. So I'm honoured to have the Mafia Princess, Marisa Merico.
Nice to meet you, Terry.
Yeah,
thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. And I mean, I've read your book, and I've got to say, you know, it blew me away. I've always been one of those kids. You know, I'm sure anybody when they're sort of 16 or 17 that loves, you know, crime films. They love the romance of the mafia. They love the idea of this code of honour. And you know, I think films like Goodfellas and Casino and The Godfather make people think, you know, the romance of being in the mob, you know, so.
There's always the air of mystery, isn't there? They always want to know a little bit more, even though a lot of people are against crime in general, aren't they? But they're very curious about that life,
I think
lifestyle.
I think all the people I've spoken to over the years, I think they'd like to be in the mafia, but they don't actually want to get shot, put in jail or murdered. So.
Take the risk. So, you know, of course they don't know what he does, do they? So, you know, when it comes to our family, we were born into it.
Right.
You know, we're going back to the late 1800s that it was formed.
Wow.
So we're generations of it. My Nonna, which is my father's mother.
Right.
She was born into that. My father was born, and obviously I was born. So we're talking about generations of it. Yeah. And it's a way of life. It's not, you know, you don't sort of, the initiation into the family is from a very young age, from my father, of things that they made him do. So where you then look at the American crime families, the initiation is you cut the finger, you do the thing with the blood. It's totally different.
Right.
When you're born into it, it's so different.
Right.
From
I mean, that's really...
You're already in it, basically.
Yeah. So you don't have to be initiated.
No.
I mean, did your family take outsiders, or did you have to be born into it to be...
The outsiders would be a cousin of a cousin, a friend that sort of was married to someone that's... they'll be somehow related, even if it's 3 times related, so down the line.
So it wasn't really for outsiders, it was always...
Yeah, it did. And they never took just anybody from the street. There would have to be someone that was trusted. That was the main. It's a trust.
Right.
which in the end was the thing that brought my family down, because that trust just went. And
what I'm fascinated about is, how does your mother in Blackpool end up with the Godfather? I mean, it sounds like a crazy story, right? But I'd love you to.
Yeah,
share.
so she went as an au pair to Milan
Right.
in 1968. Right. She was there a couple of years, and then she met my dad. Right. And after about 6 weeks, I came along. So it was a whirlwind sort of, in them days, it was difficult, for contraception and things like that. Right. So it was sort of, but of course then he was only 20, she was 24.
Wow.
So he was a really young man.
So Emilio was a fast starter.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he used to go and pick her up, and he had a different car every day. And she'd say, well, where's these kids? Oh, my father's got a garage. Right. He didn't. He used to nick the cars and pick her up and then just dump them, and then just nice, fast cars, And that was at 20 years old. And my mother was completely oblivious. Obviously, she'd come from just outside Blackpool, and she wouldn't ever dream, but then she said she started to sort of realise, hang on a minute, she'd go back to my nonna's, and there was 12 siblings.
Right.
So my dad would say, oh, these are the kids from upstairs, from the lady upstairs. Because obviously he was 20 and the youngest was a bit older than me. And then actually I came along, and at the same time my nonna was pregnant with my auntie. There's a 1 month difference between me and my dad's youngest sister. Right. So, and actually my nonna breastfed me. Wow. Because my mum couldn't. Anyway, she actually But I mean, you used to have that in the Victorian times, didn't you? The milk maidens or something. They used to call them. But actually, my nonna. That's how close I was to my nonna. That blonde was from. And
I take it, at that time, you've obviously been born. What happened with your mother and Amelia?
It was. I mean, he was very young, and he started going with other women. And of course, my mum wasn't going to put up with that, and they split. I think I was about 2, but then she decided to stay on. She loved my family. Right. I was a grandchild, so altogether she stayed about 13 years in Italy. Wow. So she stayed till I was 9. Right. And then the family started going into heavier crime. So so the family started from a nonna's, which is the 'ndrangheta that you spoke about, from the toe of Italy. Right. So you've got the Cosa Nostra, Sicily, Gomorra from Naples, and the 'ndrangheta is from the toe of Reggio Calabria. Right. So she then transferred herself with my nonno to Milan in the mid-60s, and decided to sort of have her own clan up there in the life of crime. You've got to remember, my nonna, till the day she died, couldn't even read or write. Wow. She wrote an X as a signature, but she's in the Archibalds, the Italian law book. She's one of the highest ranking women in the mafia. Wow.
I love the name as well in the book, Granny Heroin.
Yeah, I mean, that's bad. It's not a good... Did you
call her Granny Heroin?
No, I didn't. No, the newspapers did. Right. No, and obviously the authorities, because that's one of the things that they used to sell at one point. Right. And my nonna did. And for her sins, she had children that became hooked on heroin. Right. So she sort of paid for that, for doing that, which is... But you've got to understand, and I'm not condoning whatever my family has done or my nonna. And my nonna was she'd be up at 6 cooking for 20 of us. She'd have the stray dog in. She'd give you a last penny. She was so home and family based. She never went out the door, but yet she would turn around and say, right, he's done that, kill him.
Right. While she's making the pasta.
Yeah, and it was like that. It was crazy in the way you think but that's the environment we sort of grew up in. But as children, you don't pick up on that till later.
With your mother, I mean, did she? When did she sort of start realising that he doesn't have a garage?
Well, obviously she went in there, and then I was born, and then obviously she fell in love with the family. She loved the siblings, she realised they were there. They had to stay there for a while. I was little at my non's. Nonna's. I have no idea where, because it was a 2-bedroom house with 12, so and children. So I just have no. But then they moved out. But she loved the family, and she did get pulled into things. My mum, and that's why she made a decision at 9 years old in 1979 that she wanted to come back to the UK. She was scared of what would happen to me as well.
Right. Your Nonna sounds like somebody everybody wants. Everybody would love to wake up in the morning. There's all this food being made, and then there's lunch being made. I mean, I've my life revolves around food. So
Yeah.
I'll be in heaven. But when you was born, obviously growing up in that environment, I mean, what was it like? I mean, you must have fond memories of waking up in the morning. You've got all these people around. There's all this food, and there was probably that real close sense of family.
That's what I always say. That see, so I came back to the UK at 9, and I went back at 17. I met my father's. I'll get to your questions. Sorry, I'm just going roundabout way. But I met the father of my daughter, my eldest, Lara, and I fell in love, and that pushed me to go back. Right. But there was a lot more. It was the family environment, the love, the affection, I'm not seeing my family. Oh, hi, you cheek, right. and the cuddle, and the kiss, both cheeks. It's the closeness, the warmth of it, the loyalty, the love, the everything that people don't seem to think. Oh, this is a crime family, it's a mafia family. Right. But there is all that as well. You can't. It's not just the bad. Right. You are a family. You are, and Andrina is family. That's what it means. Right. It's the origins of it. Right. Is a family, and that's the difference. When you get the organised crimes, where organisations, they're all from different mothers and fathers, and with us, we're all connected. We're all blood related. Family. It's family. So it wasn't just that, and then obviously, but the thing is, I always say I went back into that at 17. All these reasons, I fell in love, and then this, and my father wasn't happy that I was with him. He didn't speak to me for a year. He was just coming out of prison. Right. There was a lot going on, and that's where I wanted to be. When you talk about choices, I was actually looking at going to America to working on a summer camp. Right. I was doing business studies. Wow. I was looking at, and then I fell in love with my daughter's dad. That's it. My life completely took a different route. And then I wanted to go back. I love my family anyway. I used to go every year. You see, the mistake my mum made, she took me away at 9 because she was afraid of what may have happened. Right. But she took me back every year for the summer holidays. Right. So of course we were stuck in the UK, not much family, certainly not as big as that and as close as that. Right. My mum was on benefits. We had nothing. And then I'd go there and we had everything. I was a princess. And, we'd go with 1 suitcase, come back with 3. Right. And my Nonna used to give her money. I'd have the whole outfits for the whole winter and summer till the next summer. Right. So there was a lot of that. So how can, and I speak to friends and they'll say, we would have made the same choices than you would even at 17.
Absolutely. You're in rainy Blackpool. Looking at that, thinking we're going to have beans on toast, so you can be there and you can have lobster pasta every night.
Yeah, and of course there's an element of that. I'm not going to lie. It's human nature. Right. You wouldn't be human, and I'm not going to sit here and say, of course there was the glamour but of course as you went along, you took risks. It wasn't that glamorous. Right. And you think, everything didn't come easy. My dad made me work for what I got. Right. Where, his women didn't work for it. Right. But I was his daughter and I should have technically not worked for it. Right. But I had to. Right. But it was my way of showing, I'll show you. So my father's only just started to admit this. But I had very much daddy issues. Right. Because my father is very old school, who wanted a boy. Right. Wanted a boy to carry on. Right. So you got the girl. So to the point where this is an underlying subconscious. I was told about this, but I feel later on in life, of course now as a criminologist, because we're moving forward, it was like a therapy because I looked at everything.
Right.
So when this has come up with this, now I was in a restaurant with his friends and him, I was 8 years old.
Right.
And he went on so much about this, I want a boy, that he made me cry.
Wow.
And one of his friends knew my mum, and he told my mum.
Right.
Now, my mum told me this story, and he didn't, I just thought, oh, well, you know, but as I've got older, more mature,
Right.
so when I went back and I started doing things with my dad, I didn't care about having this, that, getting paid, having nice things. I wanted to show him that I could do it.
Right.
That he didn't have the boy, but he had the girl with balls. Excuse my expression, because my uncle used to say that you're the boy, you know, you're the boy you wanted, but you're the girl with balls.
Right.
You know that you know that, and he was shown that I can do this.
Right.
And I know now, as I've got older, this isn't making excuses because I committed crimes.
Right, right.
It's absolutely not, because I did them and I did my time. So I've accepted that, but there was also an element of that. Right. But it's only as I've got older that these daddy issues, I realised that a lot of, because I am very much like him in character, very stubborn, very strong-minded, and I'm a survivor, you know. For all intents and purposes of him wanting this boy, he does have a boy, but I'm not going to say he's nothing like me.
Right.
Not the youngest, the one that's sort of a bit older anyway. We won't get into that because I'm sure my dad doesn't really want me talking about it. But he's not the boy that he wanted, that he would see.
So you've sat him down since and said, Dad, you know, you got your boy, but I'm your favourite girl.
And there you go. You know, I'm the one that you wanted, what you thought a boy would be.
Do you know what's funny? When I had my children, I longed for a boy. Maybe it's just a man thing, you know. And then I had a boy, and then I had another boy, and then my wife sort of said to me, "Oh, you know, we've got one more go, you know, and I want to try for a pink one."
Yeah.
I was thinking, do I really want another boy? Do I really want a girl? You know, I just went, okay, whatever, and we had a girl. And I've got to say, as a father having two boys and then having a girl, the girl was a completely different experience. And I think in a way, if I'd have had the girl first, I might have been I wouldn't mind having another girl, because the girls, for some reason, when they're younger, they're always sort of like little daddy's girls, and the boys are sort of always mummies.
Even the older the daddy's girls, but you tend to, the boys are a lot more sensitive.
Right.
You tend to find that they are. The girls, they're a bit like cats, aren't they? They won't come to you unless they have to come to you. You know, they won't unless they want that. You know, they are quite harder in certain ways, the girls. Yeah. Whereas then you get the boys growing up to be harder than the girls in different ways. But you know, I tend to find, without being sexist here, or that women are stronger in other ways.
Absolutely.
As we know.
Absolutely.
You know, maybe not physically, but so I think that was a shock to my dad, I guess, with me.
And growing up in Milan, obviously, you know, as a child, and obviously you grew up really as an Italian, because you were an Italian.
Yeah.
But did you get to a point where, you know, you started sort of thinking, this is obviously, you know, you sort of become aware of what the family did? Or do you think that was when you come back to England at that point, that's when you start to realise, or
it was actually, so I was 9 years old, she took me back to Blackpool, my mum, and we used to go back every year. By this time, 79, my dad was on a run to America for shooting somebody that died. He was on a run for about 3-4 years, so next time I saw him I was 13. And even though I kept going back every year between 9 and 13, this certain year I went back, I went to see him in prison. Right. And of course, from 9 years old to 13, I looked like a woman. Right. You know, I was developed. I was, you know, and my dad was shocked too. So it was only then that I really saw, we're going in prison.
There's something different. Yeah.
So when people say, when did you actually realise? It was 13. Wow. Of course, you're more curious, you're older, you sort of want to ask questions, even though I didn't. Right. And you become, you know, you're presuming things, you're more curious. When you're smaller than that, I just tend to think, especially back then, it's different now. You know, they've got phones, they've got this, they're far more advanced than what we were that generation. We're talking about early 80s. So it was different then.
Yeah. So when so obviously when you saw your dad in prison, you know, it must have been really tough for you because obviously, you know, you wanted a relationship with your dad. So having that sort
I had a lot of resentment for him back then because when he was on the run, he had another couple of children.
Right.
And all he did was ring me.
Did he actually tell you and say, oh, by the way,
Yeah, and he rang me to say, oh, you've got a sister, or you've got a brother. That's the only times. And I was so angry because that's the only times he rang me. And I was jealous.
Right.
Well, I was his only girl, and now, well, I don't think I was anyway then, but then it's come out after that he had other children.
Do you know what's funny? It's like from a man's perspective, and
he's
from
very
a woman's,
selfish.
and from a woman's perspective, what's funny is you know, to most people, right? You know, if that had happened, you'd be thinking, I better not mention this because it's going to upset my wife.
He was very selfish. That's what I'm trying to say. My dad was so in what was going on at that moment. He was here, there, and everywhere. Right. He admits that himself. Yeah. He'll tell you. He'll say, "I was very, very within." You know, he just didn't think beyond. I mean, I have now the best relationship with him that I've ever had in my life, and he's in his 70s, and I'm in my 50s. Wow. You know, so I suppose it's never too late.
I mean, I suppose the only redeeming thing is at least he rang you up and told you, because obviously if he hadn't told you and then 10 years later you've got someone going, hi, sister.
But I'm like, yeah, but at the time it's like, which is best? You're upset a child then.
Yeah.
So by the time I got to him at 13, I was a bit like stubborn anyway, and he saw this young woman.
When he rings you, it's like, let me guess, you got another one.
No. So, but it was, I was his first, I was his girl, I was always, he probably spent more time with me than any other of my siblings. Right. Apart from now, he's got a young one that he has spent time with. Right. But, so he's got a few. So I had some that I don't know. I've never met them.
Right. And then obviously, so you're going through this while he's on the run. Obviously, he's in America, he's in New York. Was the family connected to a family in New York or?
Yeah. So while he was on the run there, he actually had a restaurant with somebody there, right? And he was still carrying on doing obviously crime, crime. So he was connected to the Joe Gambino. Right. Gotti was somehow in the picture. Right. He'll have his own tales with that. Right. And at one point he was on a speedboat with Marlon Brando's daughter. Wow. Doing something probably shouldn't have been doing. You know, there's all sorts. I mean, he's got so many things that he did over there. And he was a fugitive at the same time. Wow.
So when he's in New York, so how did he sort of, you know, he's shot this guy dead, and he's obviously got to go. So how did
he was supported by the family. Right. So obviously you can't be on the run. You can't be a fugitive without money, can you? So he was supported by the family. The family were importing drugs into America to him. Right. And he had connections there.
How did they get him out of Italy into America then?
He went under a false passport. It was my Nonna's brother's passport. Right. He looked very much like him. Oh, right. Of course, in them days, he just swapped the pictures. Right. And it had looked at specific, you know, beard, it's not beard, a moustache, and he looked very much like him. Right. And, you know, like I have an auntie that's similar age. Right. Her brother was similar age to my dad. It's crazy, you know, because we're having so many children. Right. A lot of us at similar age. Right. I used to hang around with my father's brothers. Right. Because they were a year or two older than me. Right. So they were my generation, not my father's. You know, that's how big the family was. Right. But so while he was over there, and then he actually, can't remember, it was some traffic violation that they caught him on. Right. Realised who he was, that he was wanted in Italy for murder, basically. Right. That's when he got extradited in '83. Right. And it's the time when I saw him. And then he did some time there. I mean, even in there, you know, I realised my Nonna used to take me So she used to stop at the actual main place in Parma. He was in Parma prison,
Right.
you know, Parma ham,
Right.
parmigiano, the cheese. She used to go actually where they made it
Wow.
to pick up. So in Italy, you get a package of 5 kilos
Right.
of a package you can take into the prison to them.
Right.
So it's either 2.5 kilos of food, 2.5 of clothing,
Right.
and you can do this every week.
Wow.
Yeah. So, or it can be all food, or it can be all clothes. So so they check it all. But I remember my nonna used to stop at all these the best things to pick him up. And then he'd probably have 20 kilos going in.
Right.
And then we found out later he was literally the governor of the prison was in his pocket, and he was actually being taken out on the weekend to eat at the governor's house.
Wow.
Out the prison.
I mean,
He used
it
to
does sound like a scene in Goodfellas, doesn't it?
he's in his suit. He used to come in his suit, and we'd be away from all the rest of the prison visits.
Right.
And he'd be all suited and booted, and I think, you know, they were all the rest, you know, with looking bad like you do in prison, and you're obviously not got, and he's clean shaven, smells nice, suit.
Right.
And obviously then I thought, there's something, my family's not, something going on.
Right.
As I said, at 13, then the curiosity, and then of course, but then you never talk about it, and you can't ask questions.
Yeah.
You know, people say, well, you think you can ask questions, you can't, but it's out of respect. It's not
Yeah.
because you fear.
Right.
You fear the answer, you fear the reply.
Right.
But it's out of respect, you don't.
So what age would you say you really sort of realised, you know, what it was about? Would you say
At 13, I realised there was things not right, but obviously 17.
right?
17, I fully.
And was that when you met Bruno when you were 17?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, I mean, tell us about that. I mean, you know, because
He was my uncles. They were into crime.
Right.
He didn't need to be. He came actually from a really good family, from bakers.
Right.
They had baking the shops.
Right.
Bakers, they used to supply the council, the schools.
Right.
They were very wealthy parents. He had, you know, he had private school. He had,
Right.
and he had no need to be in that life.
Right.
But of course, he was a black sheep of the family, and he became involved. I think he just liked he was just one of them. He was well known.
Right.
I actually didn't like him at first because all the girls were, and who does he think he is?
How did he sway you? What did he do?
He made me laugh.
Right. Okay.
He made me laugh.
Right. Right.
That's how, and I thought, I'm looking at him a different way now because he made me laugh.
Right.
I think you probably knew that by then that I wasn't gonna. There was no way I was gonna like him in any other way, probably.
Right.
And then that was it. No, not all the family were against it. As I said, my father was, and then my nonna said, no, they're in love. Leave them alone. Give them a chance.
Right.
And everyone had to accept it then.
Right.
I mean, he got a few slaps from my uncles. I'm sure he would have from my dad, if my dad could have got hold of him.
Right.
But you know, the more you make somebody not a teenager not do something, the more a teenager wants to do it.
Right.
So it's probably the not the best way to go around it.
Right. And then, you know, obviously, when would you say that you and Bruno was official? You know, you was actually allowed to sort of.
Pretty much straight away. Right. Then we started getting deeper in the life of crime. So he became sort of my dad. Then he was sort of released 88, might be 18, and then he started building the empire back up. Because obviously he'd been inside with loss and so I mean within 3 years he was making millions.
Wow.
And he was the mastermind of going abroad. He was the one that, you know, I had another uncle that was quite high up, but very much in Italy.
Right.
He didn't venture out he did, but he didn't, not like my dad.
Right.
So I guess my dad was sort of the mastermind behind it. My nonna was the logistics.
Got it.
So without the other, they couldn't do anything really. Right. They were the strongest ones. You know, my dad would bring in, so let's say a shipment came in. Right. Of late times, it was cannabis. Right. We were supplying 9 countries were involved. We were supplying Europe with it. And so we're based in Marbella. Right. And, in Milan, but we kept, obviously. Right. And So if a shipment came in, there'd be tons of it.
Wow.
My nonna already knew it was going there. It was already sold before it came. You know, he'd have 300 kilos. He'd have many kilos.
Did you like have a
I never
warehouse?
touched. No, no, it was garages.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was garages.
And then what happened?
They paid the people that had the garage. Sorry,
Right.
and they mainly people's garages that obviously didn't all over Milan and and you know, a lot of people that were supplied were well-to-do.
Right.
Nightclub owners or people they had money from different legitimately.
Right.
Some of them couldn't get my head around why they would even risk.
Do you just think it's just become a thing ingrained in the culture where you're doing it, I'm doing it, she's doing it, we'll all do it?
Yeah, I think a lot of it though over there was because they had a backup of my family.
Right.
You couldn't just, you know, like in England it's different. You could just open up a shop doing crime where you want. No one.
Right.
Whereas in it, you can't do that. You know, especially in areas, even if you're out in the sticks, it'll be somebody's territory.
Right.
So they'll want a cut of. Now, because these people used to come to us, they were untouchable.
Right.
Because they know they'll have the backup from my nonna, my dad, and the family down south.
Obviously, your dad and your nonna, when they was building this empire, and obviously you're now sort of there with Bruno.
I'm there building it with them, really.
Yeah.
And why is that? Because people say, oh, don't you resent your dad for getting you involved in, you were so young. But when you got a lot of money coming in to the point where you've got a money machine, because that's how much money's coming in, who do you trust?
Right.
If it's not your closest. And that, I had the Coots bank account, you know, that was mentioned.
Nigel Farage had one of them.
Yeah, well, actually, a couple of weeks ago, when it was all out, they actually mentioned my dad.
Right.
My dad, Emilio DiGiovine, had a Coots bank account. So if all these people had it, and Pinochet, was it someone else that was mentioned in the papers, but my dad was mentioned next to Nigel Farage, that if he could have it in the 90s, he's, you know, why can't... So, which I find it quite amusing in a way that even now it's talked about. But so we had a joint Coots bank account. So I'd go and deposit money.
Right.
I'd go and... But I'd arrive with, you know, I'd have like sort of, if I flew over to Geneva, you know, the Bridget Jones knickers at the time, you know, all stuff. So I'd probably look as big as I am now. But
Do you think Bridget Jones modelled herself on your knickers from?
Maybe. Maybe it was before that time, wasn't it?
Right.
So,
but that was literally so that you could just bring the cash in.
yeah. So I'd all around, and then of course when we used to move the monies, apart from just, you know, going paying for shipment down southern Spain, so we drive from Milan 10 hours to Seville, where we had a contact there. Panels of the car.
Right.
You know, we used to put the money in. We'd have to take it out if you stopped halfway, because we couldn't trust.
You don't want someone staying in the car.
You know, hundreds of thousands left in the car.
Wow.
So what I'm saying is, how can I get it? Because my father, who could he trust? Because even closest family members, and I'm not being, but you couldn't. When there's money involved, I'm sorry, but it changes people.
And when you went into the bank, which it was Coots, yeah, was it literally like walking in with two big bags with cash? You said,
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
Wow.
And I tell you one time, which I really got slated in the papers for.
Right.
So it came out that I'd gone to Coots Bank to withdraw some money, and I'd actually taken my daughter Lara. Right. So at the time, I had a little. She wasn't even one.
Right.
You know but then you put on a pram, car seat.
Car seat.
So I had this car seat, and I'd gone there on the. It was all of a sudden, and I'd gone there because actually by the time I had Lara, I was drawing myself back massively because I really thought, oh my God, I've got a child now. Right. I have responsibility. It hit, really slapped me exactly what I was doing. And it scared me, you know, because it wasn't just myself. So this one time I went, it was actually she was the manager, bank manager, Sonia she was called. Right. And she got done, by the way, so I'm not. And I didn't take a bag with me. So she said, I thought, where am I going to put these packs of money? Right. So inside the carry cot, if you will, the car seat, was grooves.
Right.
So she looked, she went like, put it in there, under the baby. So afterwards, it came out, I think, in court or whatever, on the newspaper, she used her child to, and I thought, actually, it was the manager that said, because I'd gone with not even with a bag big enough. Because obviously I was baby sort of brain and things like that, and it was a last minute thing, and but it's just to show that, it's not all. Of course, it's organised, but a lot of the things, it's just spare the moment. You just and people think, oh, you're just laying in bed all day, and you do. Actually, it's not, and you're risking so much. You can be out at 4 a.m. doing the job. You got to put a lot into it you weren't expecting. And going back to my father, a lot of who he was with, women, they didn't have to lift a finger. Yeah, I was risking. Saying that though, the last lady he was with, he had a child with, which is my sister, which is my daughter's age. This is what I'm talking about. We all, she did 13 years, just for a conversation that she was having a laugh with a friend, in regards that she showed the soldiers what to do. She told them what to do. She was having a laugh because actually she wasn't really involved in anything. I did far more than she did, and I got less. Do you know what I mean? But in the phone conversation, they were tapping all the phones. So that's what they were based. I mean, I think a lot of what we went down on in the courts in Italy, it would never been admissible over here. It would not. You wouldn't. Always based on people that then started talking.
When you were talking about, obviously, this cash, what would you say is the most amount of cash you've seen in one room?
But probably not short of $1 million. And we're talking in different currencies. I mean, my dad had a deposit box with £1 million English in £5 notes. I know that sounds crazy because imagine the amount, but it was in £5 notes. Which obviously got confiscated. Really, it got frozen and did 8 kilos of gold. There was a lot of. I know it sounds £5 notes. Imagine the mountain, but it did.
But that was when £5 notes were a lot of money.
Yeah, but I mean,
now you could buy a cappuccino.
Well, but it just shows it's obviously from the streets. And but at that time it was cannabis. But then we'd supply the Dutch with cannabis. They supply with then ecstasy. Because it was all coming in then. It was the years of the ecstasy.
I mean, what would you say the family's main, was it drugs or was it everything? Was it sort of protection?
Everything. No, sorry, no weapons, military weapons. The protection side of it wasn't so much. I mean, my Nonna, so she lived in this area, Piazza Prealpi, for years and years. Anyone that tried to go to a shop there and extort them and say, right, if you don't pay this, we'll put your windows through. They'd go to my Nonna, the people from the bar or whatever, say, they've just threatened me. And my Nonna, oh, have they? So she'd actually keep the peace. She don't have that anymore. But she'd never take the money from them. She'd looked after them. And they looked after her in the way of, if police had come round, or even though we had a few police in our pockets, obviously we knew when we were going to have raids. Not all the time, but most of the time. We'd had a raid once, and I remember I was with my dressing gown. Somehow I managed to put some money around me. I was sat in the kitchen on a chair. Under there was a tile that was loose that had a gun in it. But they never used to look at the women. They wouldn't search us or even look at us.
Was that your nan's gun then?
Well, it was one that was kept in the house.
Okay, just
22 that was. Well, you're in that life. You're not gonna. You've got to have something. Not that you'd ever expect anybody coming to your home. But that's the life that you live. You wouldn't, And then we did go to war. The family down south was to war with other rivals, with other family. They started up in the north. They put money. When I got married, my dad couldn't come because he was wanted by police, and then he had a thing on his head. Someone had put. It was about £100,000, and my dad was really insulted. He said I'd give him 200 to go away. It was like, how dare you? And but of course they were scared of my dad because my dad is he would act.
Right.
He wasn't. My dad has killed people. He's not just this, because a lot of people are just that.
Right.
Because they want to put the fear in you. They were scared of my family more than ever because of my dad.
Right.
Because he was someone that he wasn't the crazy of spare the moment.
Right.
But he would do what he, and like now, you know, he's changed his life, he does what he does, and people say, well, is he not scared that, well, no, but because apart from the fact he's 30 years on,
right,
people move on,
right,
but also he may have changed his life, but he's still the person that he is.
right.
You know, people say, oh, you're a different person then. And I said, no, we're not different people. We're the same people.
Just older.
We're just, no, you know, but we just to think differently. And of course, we abide by the law.
Right, yeah.
But it doesn't mean to say we're still not survivors. And, you know, especially my father.
I mean, when the sort of rivalry happened and you started having these sort of wars and issues with people trying to obviously, was it because they wanted to have a piece of the business, or was it because they wanted to do their own version of what you were doing? I mean, what was the war about?
So there was a war from 1989, down south with our families, with others in the Ndrangheta. It was really bad. We lost a lot of family members.
Right.
At that time, my father was coming up more and more in the world, as I was explaining, within 3 years. He managed to get weapons and arms, you know, military weapons.
Wow.
I'm talking about AK-47s and bazookas. We sent them down. I took them down.
Wow.
At one point. Don't even ask that, but that was an experience.
Did you have a...
we had a car that had an underneath.
Right.
Sort of.
I thought to say, did you have a Volvo Estate? I could just...
No. It was actually a Citroen, an old Citroen.
Right.
We made you know, got a garage to do a sort of, how do you call it, an underneath panel conversion that...
Right.
But I'll never forget, I went with actually my daughter's dad, and sort of 10 hours to go from Milan to round about that to Calabria.
Right.
There was a war on as well, so we had to be. And I'll never forget, we stopped at a service station and there was 2 cop cars, carabinieri,
Right.
which are military police.
Right.
They're harsh, you know. So brave. I mean, we're so brazen. We just parked right next to them. Got out, got a coffee and a sandwich, a panino, and got back in, and we had bazookas in the, and they never even looked at us. But if they'd had dogs, thank God they didn't have dogs. But I just think, oh, what was I thinking? But I was 19, 20. Just, I didn't think. But it was my family.
So the way people met their end in this war, they were getting a bazooka through the window or a machine gun.
They didn't have the military weapons that my dad got down there for his family. That's what ended the war.
Wow.
My dad sending the weapons down there to them and paying for them.
Wow.
But, I mean, my dad was at a point where he was going to be quite high up in the family down there.
Right.
Because he had his my nan's cousin that he was talking to, he was the highest.
Right.
You know, in the hierarchy, he was the highest member of the family. Then he got arrested. There's so many things I could go on forever with.
And with your dad, when he obviously had that thing with that guy, what actually happened? Because before he went to New
America.
York, yeah. What happened?
So this guy, he was in a group. They were kidnappers.
Right.
So there was a lot of kidnappings back then, late 70s, of in Italy, of very wealthy people.
Was it John Paul Getty? His son got kidnapped, didn't he?
Yeah, actually, yeah. I'm not sure. I don't think it was anything to do with them, but they were quite high profile. You're talking about government and that as well. They kidnapped the children.
Wow.
And they wanted a ransom. They got it. So they, this group of people, which this guy that he eventually shot was involved. My dad didn't have anything to do with kidnapping. He didn't agree with it. He didn't like it. Right. So this guy tried to sort of undermine my dad. So my dad was supplying someone with something. This guy came to my dad and said, look, such and such has bad-mouthed you, that you might be doing this. And my dad said, well, why would I do that when you're an asset to me? Right. I'm selling you this. You're coming making me money each week. Why would I do that? Right. But he was a liability, this guy.
Right.
So what happened was, my dad actually was already going to go to America because he wanted to get away, had a few things going on, and he was, police were trying to find him.
Right.
So this story, I mean, he'd hid this passport that was his uncle's passport with his picture, my dad's picture on it. Right. He was ready to go. This guy turned up just outside my nan's. My dad had already had a run-in with him. He knew he was trying to stab him in the back. He knew, didn't trust him.
Right.
And said to one of my dad's soldiers, this guy came with a driver. My dad said to the soldier, go by the driver. If you do anything weird, it does anything, shoot him. Because if not, they're going to shoot us. Right. So anyway, the actual guy that my dad didn't trust went towards my dad, went to get something out of his pocket. My dad just there and then shot him.
Right.
He was getting out a set of keys or something. It was something that wasn't a gun. But,
but you didn't
my dad didn't hesitate because he said he's going to take me.
Right.
And the driver was sort of pulling a gun out, and my dad's soldier, shot him.
Right.
I don't think he died, the driver, but that's sort of like, but he was right outside my Nonna's across the road. Right. My auntie lived on top and she was pregnant. He would never have done that. And then after that, he literally had to go. It was sort of, and then he was, I mean, when he came back, they reduced it to manslaughter and, but, I mean, my dad wasn't, he was what he was, wasn't he? He wasn't, I guess you think, he was a bad guy. Of course he was a bad guy, but he was his life.
Yeah. I mean, with your experiences, though, was you ever worried that obviously you could get whacked or somebody would?
Oh, I nearly was on my wedding day. Wow. If my dad had turned up to my wedding, it was around the time he was wanted by police and that, so he wasn't going to turn up. But my wedding day, the police were watching, and apparently there was 2 guys on a bike with helmets ready to shoot if my dad had turned up or was I was in a Rolls Royce going to the venue afterwards. Right. After I got married, it was my granddad that was there. Right. He gave me away. Right. Because I knew that my dad couldn't be there. Right. But had my dad been there, they probably would have shot at the car. Who
were they?
They were the rivals that my dad then was. Right. They'd offered $100,000 for his head, and he was. Right. It was that period of time.
And how was that resolved? Did they all just get wiped out, or was there a truce?
Well, yeah, because obviously, and the family was at war at the time, so they saw weakness, so they tried to swoop in up north.
Right.
But my dad was too strong for them.
Right.
So they ended the war down south. By ending that, they were backed up by other families, the rival family. Right. So by ending that down south, it scared them. Right. They're not going to win up there. Right. They're not, and it wasn't. It was the tension of they would try and do things. They didn't directly. I had to go around with I had a gun in my car. Right.
Did you have to have shooting lessons, or did you?
Yeah. What, with my dad?
No, because
no. Well, I had to sort of know how to protect myself.
Absolutely, because a lot of I know. I mean, you know, I'm a quarter of Italian, only the best part. Obviously. Yeah. And I remember my Nonna was she spoke hardly any English, and when we used to go and see her, because she married my mum's dad, who was a British soldier, and then come back with him, and they set up here. Obviously, had my mum and her brother, and then we used to go there once a week on a Sunday, and she had all these like horses running around in the field. She had all these chickens running around, and I remember like always encouraged me to go and play with the chickens. And then one day she came out, and she grabbed this chicken and just like broke its neck, and then just went with the fit and just started plucking it out.
In front of you?
And I was just like...
How old were you then?
I was about 6, and I was just like, you just killed a chicken, right? And it's sort of... But it was just normal to her.
It's a way of life over there.
And then she cooked it, and there was a guy called Gennaro, who was her brother, and he lived in a house. And he had a rifle, and he would actually go out into the woods and shoot things. And he would actually say to me, you know... So it's ingrained in that, you know... You have to do this, you have to do that. Yeah, and it was just normal to them. But I used to call her Funny Nanny because I thought she was mad because she couldn't speak English and she was killing these chickens. So
Yeah.
I always used to call her Funny Nanny.
Yeah.
But for you, I mean, growing up in that thing.
Yeah, but the shooting was down in the Shumara, which is it's like a waterway down in the fields. Well, so it's in between. Escalates is where the family was.
Right.
So my nonna used to have a house down there.
Right.
Well, it was more like apartments. Right. So one would be left for us in the summer, and a brother would live in another one. And so the shooting was down there. They'd have rabbits.
Right.
That they skinned a rabbit in front of one of the aunties.
Right.
In front, I was about similar age, 7, 8 probably, and I was like, please don't kill the white one. And she'd go and kill the white one, and and then I remember she skinned it in front of me. I said, what are you going to do with the skin? And she said, I'll make you a pair of knickers if you want. I mean, they were harsh. They were harsh, and I was like, she wouldn't have said that if my dad was here. I was like, if my dad was here, she wouldn't have said that we were scared of my dad, and it was that I felt as though sometimes they were a bit more harsher with me. Because they had a thing about my dad.
When you actually see an animal killed for consumption,
it sticks in your head.
It is quite traumatic, and I think that does put you off eating meat, and that's probably why there's a lot of vegetarians. But it didn't put me off instantly. And the weird thing was that chicken was the best chicken because it was fresh. So in a weird sort of way, even though I thought it was crazy, the actual end result was like, wow, that's the best chicken, and it was always the best chicken or the best pasta and the best sauces,
Yeah,
so,
of course. I mean, it's just the way, we're so far from that now. We're so protected from that, aren't we? Yeah. We don't want to see what's been done before we eat what's on our plate. But in the olden ways, that's how it was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So you're handy with a gun, and he was all. But in the back of your mind, I mean, I take it when you was with Bruno, you'd always have security or people that would be with you.
Most of the time, the security was who you were. No one would ever come near. We go to nightclubs. We was front of the queue, and it was free. Right. That's how we lived. Not that we could go often. People think we didn't really have much of a life. We couldn't. Right. We couldn't. I couldn't really smoke, drink, do anything. Even though Laura's dad was a massive cokehead. Right. And it really put me off at the time. Thankfully that but it was all there. So I smoked weed a bit. It's one of them. I remember with my dad. I mean, my dad never smoked, never drank, never. Right. Completely, you think the man that he is. Right. But and even now, he's very into fitness. He's very fit for his age. He's very. Right. But I remember going to my nan's when she wasn't in a piazza. She got like a penthouse house just on the outskirts of Milan by then, and there was 2 lifts, and I remember I used to smoke. My dad didn't know I smoked, and I'd got by the front way. He come in the back way where the garages were. And I had a cigarette in my hand, and I thought, if I just put it out there now, I thought, I'm just going to carry on. So I got in a lift, smoking. We got to my nan's, and he took it, and he went, I don't ever want to see you smoke again. I was 20. And he put it out, I don't ever want to see you smoke again. And I was like, oh. I thought, I did smoke, but I didn't in front of him. Because I had enough respect not to do that. Right. But then I was going out taking, Bridget Jones, risking my life. But I couldn't smoke. And even, as I said, taking drugs and things like that, you were not allowed to. Right. You would absolutely have gone mad, and I'm not saying others did. Others did. But they're too exaggerated because, of course, when you're young and you've got everything there, you are going to have it more, aren't you? So.
And obviously, when your dad went to the... to New York, and after obviously he shot the guy for putting the keys out on him.
This is the what?
When he went?
No, this is another time.
Ah.
So this happened. So that was back in the 80s.
Oh, so that was a different occasion.
Yes.
Okay.
So the guard is when he got arrested. So around the time I got married. So I got married in 91.
Okay.
They arrested him then, but he escaped.
Right.
So I was pregnant, quite heavily pregnant. I got married in the April. In the July, he was arrested. Right. So he had, in the prison, so he's been shot a few times.
Right.
So he's always had problems with his leg, his arm, or he's made it so it's a problem even more at the time. Right. So he had a consultant in his pocket, in prison, within the prison. So normally, obviously, he was a high-risk category prisoner. Right. They would never tell you when they're taking you, but through the consultant, he knew. Right. Paid him. So he knew that at 6 a.m. on this day, of this date, he was going to the hospital. Right. Now, the hospital had underground tunnels. Right. So they wouldn't take, obviously, through to where the public is. So, of course, everybody who was working for my dad was waiting there. Right. And they took him. And because the guard had actually said, threatened my dad. Wow. If anybody comes, you're the first to go, I'm going to shoot you. So my dad then said, you know, but the guard literally just peed himself after because he thought, oh my God, he's going to shoot me now. Right. He's trying to goad my dad. Right. And then, Lord and behold, they all come in. It was the first stunt guns, actually. They just come from America. Right. And we'd got one. We managed to get one. Right. They were literally just out. The cops had it in America, and actually was dropped, and then it was all the papers. Oh my God, this stunt gun has never been seen in Italy. Even no one's got one, you know. Right. And so what happened was he was then taken out, got taken to a local restaurant that we knew very well. Right. So there's all helicopters, there's all this trying to find him, and he sat there eating in this restaurant. Next thing, he got smuggled out, and then so by this time, this is all in court papers, so I can talk about this, obviously. Right. So how we used to smuggle the cannabis was we had a massive coach, touring coach. Right. And we paid the guy that owned it. It was a double-decker one. And that all underneath had special compartments. And we would put it all under there. So we used this coach with legitimate people going on holiday from Italy. So they're sat there and this coach is full of cannabis, going up and down from Milan to Salou to wherever. Right. So we used this guy to smuggle my dad out to Spain. Wow. So he had to go under where all the cannabis would be at different times. He had to go under that for however long to pass the borders. So I remember within 24 hours he was in Spain, he rang us. Right. I'd shut my house up, gone to Rimini. I don't know if you've heard of Rimini, on the coast. Because I thought they were going to come to my house, the police are going to come and raid my house and everything. Right. So I just shut the house, went. I was pregnant, as I said, and he rang us and we were out eating and we got the champagne out. He's free. Right. You know that, and we were all sort of, yes, he's free. Of course, that's, you know, he sounds a bit... So he escaped that time. He's escaped about 3 times. Wow. In his life. He escaped from Barcelona in the 70s. Actually, escaped from New York once, but they found him again the next day. Right. He's escaped from the Milan prison before. He swapped with his brother. Made his brother do about 4 months in prison. Honestly, he swapped on a visit. Because back then you didn't have CCTV. He looked very much like him. Right. So and his brother went, yeah, I'll do it. I'll come out next day. He spent 4 months I gave him. Wow. So I'm laughing. It's not funny, but it's like you couldn't even make it up. And then the last one was in Milan. Wow. And then we were going to get him. We got mercenaries to get him from Portugal. Wow. Prison. Paid $1 million for that, and they got the helicopter across in pieces. There was a Yugoslavian war going on at the time. Right. We had an arms dealer that was overseeing it all, and I'd paid them to go and then they found a helicopter. It all came, and that we were ready to get him out from Portugal. Then that's why I was a double Cat A prisoner. Right. I mean, in the UK. So I was a bit, why me? Why are they doing this? Obviously, when I got arrested then for money laundering, they weren't taking any risks. But I'm saying, well, my father's still in, so I ain't going to go nowhere if he's still inside himself.
I mean, your father's he's got this sort of playboy, arms dealer, drugs dealer, a Houdini-like character that's running this huge crime family. I mean, it's all the stuff with the drugs in the coach and there's all these like holiday makers on the coach, all sort of oblivious to what's going on.
This is what I talk about when it's under your nose.
Right.
It's blatant. And back then, you're talking about early 90s.
Wow. I mean,
So it wasn't like now. Obviously, you've got all sorts now. You can't. There's Big Brother. I don't know how these people out there get away with things now. You know, for breaking the law.
So any of our listeners or viewers that are in their sort of 50s or 60s, if you ever went on a coach in Italy, you could have been part of this.
Well, we were shipping it to London as well. We were shipping it all over. Right. We were a big crime family back then here. Wow. They still owe my dad money.
Right.
But we were shipping, obviously, when I talk about the £1 million in fine, that was the money for shipping the cannabis across here. So there was coaches coming up here.
Wow. And when so obviously we've gone through this, obviously Dad's done these sort of various escaping from these prisons, and obviously you've had all this war going on. I mean, it's such a great story. I mean, what point did you then sort of come back to England? Was there like a turning point that made you sort of want to come back, or?
Yeah, I think the pivotal point was when I had my daughter.
Right.
I really realised that was a slap in the face. I've got another life to think about. This isn't just me being selfish.
So that was your first child?
Yeah.
Right.
So I was 21.
Right.
But then my father got arrested.
Right.
He escaped from Milan, the story I've just said. Then he went on the run. He was in Portugal. They arrested him after a year in 93 there. Of course, that's when I talk about the mercenaries and that, and then it all fell apart. They arrested everybody else. I was arrested in 94. And
that was when you was in England, though, was it?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
So what happened was he was in prison in Portugal. I was heading back. I was visiting him and running our organisation. Right. So people say, you took over. I didn't take over. Right. It was for my dad. I used to visit him in prison, get tickets, little notes, give it to each person that he's and running. Of course, there was times logistically where I couldn't ask him questions. I had to take. Right. So I was 21, 22. Wow. I look at my children, I think I would never in a million years give them that responsibility. But, people have said, and then do my criminology, I thought, well, I must have been trustworthy and reliable enough for them to give me that with my dad. Yeah. This wasn't just about, she's the next thing I can trust. She's the next person I can trust because she's my blood. But to be given such a responsibility, because he didn't give it to my uncle. My uncle wanted it from me. He wanted to kick me up the bottom to take it from me even. So there was in-family fighting. My Nonna wanted to take it. Wow. In a way. She wasn't quite like that. She supported me, but it was hard. Right. It was hard. So for that year, so I moved back to the UK. So I went to visit him, and then they'd made a second arrest, and I thought, I rang up because I'd left Laura, my daughter, there with Bruno's family. Right. And I rang up and I said, I'm coming back now. Don't come. Your family's second lot of your family been arrested. We don't know if you're under that arrest warrant. Right. So I'm from Lisbon. I flew to London, went back to my mum in Blackpool, but I did have my daughter. Wow. And I thought, how am I going to do this? I was going out of my mind. Within 2 weeks, I flew to Nice. Right. Thankfully, my daughter was on my passport. Right. And my passport was Merico. Right. My surname, I'm married. Now, in Italy, when you marry, you don't take your husband's surname.
I didn't know that.
No.
Oh, okay.
So I'm telling you this story because, thankfully, because of the same surname, they wouldn't have allowed me to take my child out. Wow. Without the father's consent. So I went over the border. They gave me Laura, and I went to Nice, and I was so joyful. Obviously, I got my daughter. Then I came back to the UK, sort of carried on certain things, but then I was pulled back massively. By this time, I'd sent from the Coots bank account the monies, bought a show house. Right. Instead of sort of tried to do things, but probably I shouldn't have done that. I should have just rented and put it somewhere else. Right. Then, of course, I got arrested a year later for money laundering in the UK. And
that was basically down to the Coots bank account.
Yeah,
and then buying the house.
I'd sent the money here. Right. And they said, look, so when I was arrested, I went to Grizzly Risley. Right. The time in Warrington, is it, Manchester? Right. it was horrible there. And then they decided somewhere in Whitehall that I was going to be a double cat A. So they took me to Durham H-Wing,
Right.
where then you had the 2 IRA Brighton bombers, Martina and Ella, eventually Mary Hindley, Rose West. I was inside with them.
Wow.
In Durham. I don't know if I can mention this, but I'm actually doing a podcast called Criminal Women myself with a lecturer from Lancaster Uni, and we talk about the women that I was inside with, not the Myra Hindley and Rose West, because everybody does about that, but the other women, the element, the side of it as the humane side of these women.
Right.
How eventually they'd become in there. You know, there's some stories that you actually think, you know, there was abuse, there was things that the judges didn't even take into consideration back then.
Right.
That's only just started in the last few years, hasn't it? So the mitigation, I guess, of certain women, how they snap and do things, but not condoning, you know, if you take a life, you take a life. But so we and that's then on, I do from the education, for harder education eventually, hopefully, towards the end of this year and next year, and in workshops and that, but as a criminologist with lived experience.
I think that's important though, because I think there's a lot of people that do these things, but if you've not been through it, you can only sort of, you know, do the academic side of it. But when you've actually been through it and experienced it, you can speak from experience and knowledge, you know. And
with an academic angle.
Yeah.
So I went into doing a criminology degree because I was curious to see.
Right.
It wasn't any other reason. It was just for myself. So I'd been the criminal. Let's see on the other side, what is the criminal? Why? Because I feel like I'm normal, whatever normal is.
Right.
Obviously, I'm not normal, and I've committed crimes. I've done, but if you look at the background, like the biological side of it, sociological side of it, you know, it's your environment, it's your almost your DNA, where you're coming from. I know you do have choices. I had choices, and I was lucky enough to be over here to have choices. Right. But I still went down that path. Right. For my own reasons, as I explained earlier. Right. My issues or whatever.
I mean, when you look, when you was actually put into prison, you know, what was your sort of initial thoughts? I mean, did you sort of feel that you'd been dealt a bad hand, or did you just think, you know, you just accepted it? And
it wasn't very nice. I was there, and then it took me about 2 weeks in H-Wing, Durham. I broke down. It really hit me because I was with lifers, and I thought, I'm on remand, but I'm never going to get out because I was a double category A prisoner. Right. So that an initial, it was, you know, the seriousness. I knew I was committing a crime, and I knew it was serious. But the seriousness of it was more to do with my dad, because he'd escaped and he'd and because as a person I wasn't dangerous. Right. You know, I didn't see myself as dangerous, but then I got it because of all that's around me. Of course, they're going to see me as dangerous. Yeah. So, I mean, I looked at some things, and Martina and Ella were the first Category A women, double Category A, so they were held as terrorists at the time, even though they say they were prisoners of war, IRA and etc. So, I was the third double Category A in the UK. Wow. I've only just since found out.
Top 3.
You know, and no, yeah. So it was mad to think. So I had experiences. It was bad for a woman because they didn't know how to handle the Category A prisoners. Right. It was all new to. So when I used to get the escorts, they used to stop at male prisons. Right. So they took me the first time. So I'm talking. So I did my sentence in the UK. I was rearrested on a European arrest warrant for Italy. Right. So I got 3 years, 9 months here for money laundering. And then Italy wanted me for an umbrella of organised crime. Right. So when I was released in Durham, I was rearrested, brought down here to be booked in at Charing Cross Station, went to Bow Street back then. They did the extradition. It's closed now, I think. And they, and then they sent me back to Durham. So I went to Holloway the first time I appeared in court. Right. By this time, I'd been inside. I was quite, you know, I knew about how things worked, and they took me to Holloway, and I was shut in for 24 hours, and I was sort of saying, look, I'm allowed to go out, you need to, it's not my fault you haven't got helicopter lines, you know, you can't keep a category A. It's not. And I wish I hadn't said anything, because the next time I went to Belmarsh, they shut a whole hospital corridor to put me in one of the cells. They put a sheet on the window which overlooked a courtyard and said, if you look outside this window, the men are going to keep you up all night.
Right.
So I was like, oh, God, I don't want that. So I didn't look out the window. I didn't speak. They kept shouting. They knew there must have been someone.
Right.
So, but what they did was, bearing in mind I come from a really high category prison, very secure, I was shackled to an officer and I was cuffed in a van. I arrived at Belmarsh. They didn't really know how to deal with me. It was 2 prison officers. And so women, when they get searched, strip search, you search your top half first, your bottom half. You must never be naked.
Right.
They stripped me naked.
Right.
Give me a dressing gown. I had to squat on top of a metal detector.
Right.
Didn't ask me if I had any, time of the month. Sorry to be so specific.
Yeah.
They didn't care, even if I had that.
Right.
So by this time I'd been inside quite a while. So when I went back to Durham, I appeared in court. I was so angry. I wrote to my MP. I wrote to everyone. So I thought, this is wrong, the way I was treated. It's a male prison if they don't know how to. So I actually got an apology from Director General.
Right.
And bearing in mind, the category A prisoners are Home Office prisoners.
Right.
They're not prisoners of the governor.
Right.
The Home Office has the last say on.
Right.
Don't know if you knew that, but
didn't.
that's how it works. Yeah. So the next time I went to Belmarsh, I had the governor at the door, I had the Samaritans, I had the priest, I had everyone making sure, and I got treated better. Right. But I had to sort of, because obviously you're a name and a number.
Right.
But actually, you're still a person.
Yeah.
You're still, and I always say, if you go to prison, the first day, if you're going to be going back, there's people that go in and out all their lives. Right. Don't they? And they don't, they take the risk. But I knew from the first day I was never going to come back in there. Right. Because, and I haven't broken the law to go back in, thank God.
When you had that terrible experience, and then they said there's an arrest warrant for you in Europe for the Italian side of it. Was that?
I got extradited to Italy then, and I had to go to an Italian prison.
Wow.
Now that was a totally different. I get asked from the British prison to the Italian. Right. So the British, you've got the gym, education, sweatshop. That's what they call it. You can work. There's more to do as a structure in the day. Right. Of course, if you're on remand, you don't even have to come out of your cell if you don't want to. In Italy, you got 4 hours a day outside, which is brilliant. It's red hot as well. Right. There's no gym. You're stuck literally on a wing all the time. And it was obviously hot, and it was. So I used to, because I went to the gym 4 hours a day when I was in. That's what kept me going in my mind and made me sleep at night. Right. I wasn't on medication. Thank God, I've never had to. Right. Even now, I probably need it sometimes. But I just, and I didn't. And the doctor used to say, "Do you want some Valium?" And I go, "No, I don't want anything." And the girls would go mad with me, going, "Why didn't you take it and we'll have it?" So, it was all like, "Oh no!" And so in Italy, I used to make the girls there go out and do the gym. I used to be the instructor. Right. They let me have my ghetto blaster.
Amazing.
They let me have it from the UK when I got extradited.
She was like the Miss Motivator of the prison.
I guess I was, and it was good. I made them do cartwheels, handstands. Because, you're in there. It's like your life stops and your person stops. Right. And it's easy to give them tablets to keep them quiet.
What happened with the... how long was you actually in Italian prison?
So I was convicted to 10 years. Wow. Then I pleaded sort of guilty. It's called rito abbreviato. It's not quite guilty. I can't expect the laws. It's so different. Right. So they went down to 6 years. Right. And so when I got rearrested in the UK, so the Italian when they investigate something here, you've got the police takes it to the prosecution, they decide if there's a case or not.
Right.
In Italy, it's the prosecutor that leads the case.
Right.
So they, when I got arrested within 5 days, should have come over here to interrogate me.
Right.
They didn't. So my solicitor in Italy found this loophole
Right.
that they hadn't. It's like here, if you get arrested, you've got to be interrogated within 24 hours, 36 hours, and charged.
Right.
There was none of that. So my solicitor found this loophole, and I basically was released,
Right.
even though I'd been sentenced already.
Right.
And it sounds crazy, this, but I was released out because pending, obviously I should finish at some point my time.
Right.
But at that moment, they had to release me because they hadn't interrogated, the procedure was wrong.
Right. Right.
And what it's like charging me, arresting me, taking me to court, sentencing me without having interrogated me.
Right.
It sounds crazy, and obviously they got away with it, but
Right.
actually they didn't. So after 14 months of being in a prison there, I got released.
Wow. So what was the total amount of prison time that you served?
I did just over 4 years.
Right. Wow.
So I got just under 14 years altogether.
Wow.
But thankfully, because of this loophole, so what happened then, I asked the custom and excise still had my passport.
Right.
My mum kicked up a big fuss saying I'd been released. They sent me my passport. I came back home.
Right.
So I came back home with my daughter. 10 years later, I get a knock to arrest me again for this Italian to do my time in Italy.
Wow.
Yeah. So by this time, my mum had got cancer. I had another child. It was quite... So I went to court for that. Another extradition fight. Thankfully, Judge Howard is called. I never forget his name. He sort of said he didn't believe that I didn't know not to leave Italy, but he understood why I did.
Right.
And under the courts of human rights, due to family, you know, and that he wasn't prepared to send me back because it wouldn't benefit anyone. I'd been out 10 years. I say, and I wasn't a fugitive because my kids were at school. I had a doctor, you know, anyone that clicked to anywhere could find me. So thankfully he saw that.
You must have thought that when that happened, it was like, oh no, not again.
Yeah.
When's this going to end?
This is 2009.
Wow.
You know, we're talking 14 years ago. So I'd been out 10 years. I kept my head down.
Right.
Thank God. And then the prosecutor took me to the Old Bailey.
Wow.
With it. He said, no, I'm not happy with this result. So went to the Courts of Appeal. The Courts of Appeal, I mean, I was actually shocked. The guy just went, the judge, not the guy, he said, you're talking about a woman that sat there from 20 years ago.
Right.
She's been inside. She's, you know, they were still trying to sort of, it's like I was on trial again, even though I'd done the 4 years. So they say, you know, prison, it's, you get rehabilitated, which isn't, it's habilitated, isn't it? You do your time, you're habilitated because you're going forward, aren't you?
Right, yeah.
So I'd done all that. I'd come out, I hadn't broken the law again. So what would be the point of sending me back in?
Right. Makes
And
sense.
of course, and all things were going on with family. It was more for them. I'd have done the time because I'd done it before. Not that I'd wanted to, but it was more my children and you know, my mum was poorly. I'd never seen my mum again. In fact, she died 3 years later.
Right, sorry to
Unfortunately, she's died. But, you know, cancer and it's so...
Your Nonna, is she still around or is she...
She died about 4 years ago.
Wow.
She was 86, 87. Wow. She still... And you know what? Till the day she died, she was on house arrest.
Really?
Yeah, because even she was a Zimmer frame. And she was walking around the house and let out for 2 hours a day.
Wow.
But they said it's the mind is still sharp.
Right, wow.
So the mind, because the mind is sharp, they said, no. Honest, I laugh at it but it's not funny. But I say, you know, I say that, you know, you're going back to talking about Nonna, heroina, granny heroin and that. She lost kids with heroin.
Yeah.
She pays so highly for doing her sins, I guess. You know, she paid. I mean, she used to give everything to the church.
Do you think
she'd make it and give it to the church?
Do you think that she ever, because of that, made her want to stop, or do you think she just couldn't stop because she was?
That's all she knew. It wasn't someone that could just go out and get a job. How could she? And it was all about survival. It wasn't initially, it wasn't about making money and showing off what you got. She'd always have an apron. She could have afforded God knows what.
Right.
But she still had a simple dress and an apron on all day.
Right.
So it was about taking care of the family.
Right.
If she had money, all her money went to her family.
Right.
Especially the weakest ones.
Right.
The ones with, a lot went to clinics to dry up, she paid a lot of money to get them, and they didn't. Right. And it was it was a vicious circle.
Right.
At some point, she didn't want them to go out there and get it from someone that might have been cut really badly and they could overdose.
Right.
So she'd give it themselves. She'd have to give it.
Right.
And that sounds awful as a mother, but actually, until you're in them shoes, what would you do? You sort of think your child's going to go out there. It's like, and with anything like that, you can trust what you've got, but you can't trust what anybody else. It says it's a vicious circle. It's awful. And I would never want to be in that position, thank God. But I'm not going to judge her for that because of all the rest of the good side of her that she had.
Yeah.
And I do feel, she used to send she used to come in with, the shoplifters come with the clothes and that.
Right.
Nice clothes designer, and she send it all to the nuns to go into the prison. So all the prisoners in Milan were all dressed in designer clothes, and she would, and she could have easily have sold it and made some money. She wouldn't, and as I said, it wasn't any. All she was, she'd have the dolls that she liked. She used to have a collection of dolls, which were creepy. Then she'd have a collection of perfumes. Right. And I'm talking about, the big perfumes that you have in the shops. She'd have them there, and. But that's her only little thing that she had.
Right.
That was it. She didn't go on a holiday. She didn't have an expensive car outside. She didn't even drive.
Wow.
She didn't have... It was all about the family. She would cook from 6 in the morning, and there'd be 20 of us at dinner time.
Wow.
My uncles would come with the kids and the wives and and then me and my auntie my age, because we were there, we'd be clearing up after, which we weren't happy about.
What was her signature dish?
There was a few. She used to do tripe.
Right, see that?
The best tripe. Sorry, apparently the best. I've never tried it though.
No,
and I
when
wouldn't
you say
tripe.
My nan used to make tripe sandwiches, and it always used to make me feel ill. It just looked disgusting. I never tried it, but
apparently
she lived till she was 99, so there must have been something in that tripe that kept them going. Yeah.
Yeah, probably. But apparently spicy. It was even my mum ate it.
Right.
And she was a bit. I wish I'd have tried it actually, because but she was apparently really good. Pasta fagioli.
Right.
Bean pasta. Pasta ceci. Right. Just all the legumes and she was just good at everything. I know a few of the dishes. I do myself a lasagna.
Right.
It's a bit different from the normal lasagna. Right. So I picked up on a few things that she did. And
obviously, look with your father, what when he finally couldn't escape anymore, and had his prison sentence. How long did he actually get in? When he sort of did his time.
He got life.
Wow. And what does that mean in Italy? Because obviously life here doesn't always mean.
No, yeah. So I think it's 30 years.
30.
Yeah.
Wow.
A lot of my family members got 30 years. It was the military weapons that were involved.
Right.
They were really they really made the family pay for that.
Right.
But with my dad, it was he got life because there was a Gomorrah guy at the time when all this was going on, that someone had done something that lived in the area. We knew the person.
Right.
And he'd done something to them. So Gomorrah guy is quite high up, came and asked permission to kill him.
Right.
To my Nonna and my dad. They obviously gave the permission. The guy got killed. I mean, people ask me actually, what's the worst thing that you actually carry?
Right.
Is the fact that I knew this guy was going to die, because I walked into the conversation in the kitchen.
Right.
I overheard it. I knew the guy, I knew he had a wife, I knew the kids.
Right.
It was harsh, it was bad. But people have got to think, if my Nonna and my dad hadn't said yeah, it could have created a war with the Gomorrah.
Right.
So that's how, you know, you can't, they didn't need to ask, but they did, because you have to, out of respect. And obviously we've got a family behind us. It's not, so because of that, my Nonna and my dad got life.
Wow.
Because they just said yeah. So that's you know, by this time my dad was in Portugal.
Right.
So when they extradited him in Italy, they extradited him for certain crimes. Then he got to Italy, and they did him for murder.
Wow.
They did him for this.
Right.
So, but then he went to the courts of human rights, and they said you can't do that. If you extradite on one thing from another country, you can't then add on.
Right.
Complicated, all laws. Every law is so different.
Wow.
But yeah, it's so that's why. But a lot of, even Laura's dad, Bruno, he did nearly 20 years inside.
Wow.
He got 30 years.
And from your personal perspective, Marisa, when you look back over your life, do you look back and say, if I had it again, I'd just do the same thing, or do you sort of look back and wish you could change things? Because some people do look back in the past and wish they could change things, and other people look back and say, I've done it, I've learned, I'm where I am now, and then I'm doing this now, you know? So
Yeah, I think I wish the hurt I caused my mum.
right,
I wish I could take that back.
yeah,
That's my main, and obviously then the repercussions with my children, with because of my life.
right,
I do regret a lot of things that I did. Some things I don't, and I wouldn't be who I am today
right,
had I not done certain things. So, and I'm quite, you know, I was ashamed for a long time.
right,
You know, after I'd been inside, I kept my head down, and then I just thought that was me, and I sort of went in a shell. It wasn't me. It's only in the last few years that, the last 10 years maybe, that for 10 years I was so shut down.
right,
I didn't want anybody to know who I was, and I don't now. I don't divulge if I'm in a group, I'm in a room. It'd have to be someone saying, "Oh, you're that person," and if they ask me things, and I'll tell them. You know, I don't have a problem with that. But I do. Of course, everybody has regrets.
yeah,
We all do things at 17, 18, however big or small, you know, that we regret doing.
Yeah.
It's human nature, isn't it? I don't regret being the person I am today, though.
right, right,
I just feel that I've learned a lot. I'm possibly more tolerant of things that maybe someone my age wouldn't be,
right.
if had I not been through that experience.
Yeah. Well, I think you're, you know, you mentioned earlier about you've been sort of studying the criminology side, and you're doing these talks and these podcasts. I mean, it all sounds like
I just want to give something back.
Yeah, doing something positive.
Yeah, and for something negative to turn it into something positive. You know, when going into the schools, my priority would be to talk more about the red flags of what's going on with these younger people now, such as the money muling, the county lines, you know, how to deal with a bank account. I mean, the government's talking about doing maths till they're 18. You know, of course, yeah, maths matters, but what matters is doing the maths of having a bank account. So a money muler doesn't come along and say, "Oh, well, if I put £2,000 for your account, I'll give you 200 quid. Someone at 17, 18 that's a student is going to do it. And then they're going to get done for money laundering. It's teaching them now.
Yeah,
We're so shut down, society, on what goes on, especially middle class.
Right.
And it happens to them. You know, and it's they don't only want to see what they want to see.
Right.
They don't want to see with people with lived experience. I drive my children mad.
Right.
Because I'll say, if you do this, my son's 22.
Right.
If you go out, you have a fight, you hit someone, you hit him, hits his head, he's dead.
Right.
You're going in for manslaughter. That easy. You know, you need to think about what you're doing. Don't put yourself in a situation. And I drive them mad, and I drive my daughter mad with certain things. And I think I'm protecting them.
Right.
Because I've seen it.
But that's the thing, isn't it? I suppose really because of your life and because of what you've seen and experienced, you know, you can probably be a better role model to your children because you're going to see going to see what's coming.
Yeah, you're seeing, looking 360 degrees. You can see, well, if you do that, you do that, you do. They think
I bet they're
so dramatic.
Mum, you're always going on.
Yeah, I'm so dramatic. But actually, no, because it does happen.
Yeah.
But because a lot of people are cocooned in a world where it doesn't happen, and they're very lucky in that way. You know, you go in a country and they sort of cocoon, they whinge about stupid things. And then you said, well, just go down the road to that estate and you tell me if you'd be still whinging about that there or a piece of paper on the floor, you know, and you've got the bin going through your window or something. You know, it's. I mean, I was born in a council house. Right. Grew up in a council house. The last 20 years I've been in a council house. My life has changed in the last few years. But I'm still you know, and I'm not taking that away. It doesn't matter where you're from. Right. It doesn't. It's as long as you're right with yourself. Right. Then you can be right with others. Yeah. You know, and be right with people and do the right thing. And it's not easy. People think, oh, you're a gangster this, and you break the law. And we can all do that. Right. But can you do the time? Right. Because that's what it comes down to.
You know, I've met loads of people throughout, you know, my life and my career. I've obviously made films about criminals, you know, alive and dead. I've obviously done documentaries. We've done, you know, before I got into films and acting, I was in the club scene. So obviously you meet lots of characters, and all the ones that went down the wrong side of the tracks, they either ended up in jail or dead. You know, so there's. I don't think I've ever met anybody that's chosen that life that's gone, oh great, everything's been amazing, and I'm walking around.
Well, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. That is that life. Yeah. You know, and I mean, I've not even touched on my son's father. So I came out of prison in '98. I was writing. He wrote to me in prison. Right. I was writing to him for 4 years. I used to get loads of guys that used to write to me, and I used to say, "Oh, I'm married. I don't want to know." That's not. But if somehow I just thought, "Oh, it's nice to have a pen pal." He seems a bit older. You see, anyway, he wasn't. He was just a couple of years older than me, and then he turned out he was a really nice-looking guy, and blah blah blah. Frank Burley, my son's called that. Right. He's from Leeds. He was in that world. Right. He then got released. He was pulled back in within 6 months. He got shot dead in Leeds. I was 3 months pregnant. Wow. And, you know, and I thought, you could think, well, she still hasn't learned. No, all I know that this guy was telling me he was coming out to a life that he'd done with that life. I was in love with him. Right. I wasn't seeing exactly what he was doing, but I was starting to get, and I was pregnant. You know, it's sort of, I was 30 years old. You know, there's all the, and I'm not making excuses and I did love him at the time, and it was hard. And then he got shot dead, and it was like, I've just been within a year of coming out of prison. I wrote to this guy, and I know it sounds crazy when I used to diss the girls that used to write to guys in prison and fall in love with. How can you fall in love with someone that you don't? But actually, you can write so much more on a piece of paper. Right. On an A4, 10 sides, you can write so much more, and you can deeply get to know. Right. Than just sat there every night watching the telly with someone else. You know, and actually, I was so wrong about that. Wow. So by the time of 4 years, he gets out. Then I went to visit him for a year before he got out. Wow. He was a Category A prisoner. And that happened, and my son came along. Right. So you can imagine with my son, I'm so overprotective. Right, absolutely. Because of what happened with his dad. You know, and I thought I was always going to be on my own for the rest of my life, because I thought I'm such a complicated woman in a way. Right. But I am and I'm not. And what men find attractive, then it becomes a problem for them, because I am such a strong woman, I guess. And then I met my husband, and I'm married now. Been married a year. I'm really happy. And
Amazing.
Yeah, he's got a company. He's very regular guy, as in, he's very legitimate, I should say. You know, I was a cleaner up to doing my course, my uni, and now obviously I do talks, I speak. Yeah. trying to get into the educational side of criminology, lived experience, and I'd love to change from policy. I'd love for the politicians to listen to us.
Right.
I have got this lived experience of what works and what doesn't, because prison is just a vicious circle.
Right.
You know, it's sort of wash your hands with them out, and then they just come straight back in. It's just never going to end.
I mean, do you still speak to Bruno? Are you still?
Yeah, Lara, my daughter goes to see him.
Right.
I saw him last year. Actually, we were over there with my husband, and he met my husband.
Right.
Yeah, he's with someone else. You know, life goes on.
Yeah.
He's not had any other children, but yeah.
What about your dad? What's he doing now? Where's he?
So my dad's in Italy,
Right.
and he's actually a qualified chef now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So he's changed his life around quite a lot since everything's happened.
Right.
I can't, go too much into my dad's situation as in, but you're probably better asking him.
I mean, that was what I was going to come on to. I know it's a bit cheeky, but do you think you might be able to convince your dad to come on and talk to us?
I think so. If you make him an offer, he can't refuse.
Yeah, I'll always make him an offer. Tell him Big Terry's going to call him for a sit down. The Criminal Connection podcast. but I mean, that'd be amazing. Does he speak? Does he speak English?
It's broken. He obviously was in America for a few years, so he's picked up. But he's.
Does he sort of just walk around and go, get the fuck out of here?
Yeah, I think he's very much like that. And I'm like, the children are here, Dad.
Right.
Your great grandchildren are here. Do not say that. He'll just speak to them like that. So, no, he's of course he's very humble in his ways.
I'll tell you, Marisa, if you could make him an offer, he couldn't refuse. You could get him on, and maybe you could come back on with him, just in case we need to translate.
Yeah.
I mean, that'd be amazing.
Well, I'm his little princess, aren't I? So I'm quite sure I'll
Right.
come round. Yeah.
But no, Marisa, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure talking to you and hearing your stories. And I mean, it's just sort of, it's such a crazy life you've lived and the things you've experienced.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I am, because of it, I am who I am today. And I wouldn't change that. I'm happy with who I am today. It took a long time.
Yeah.
But more than happy, I'm at peace.
You have got a book out as well.
Yes, which I have here.
Oh, the Mafia Princess.
I've actually signed it for you.
Oh, thank you
and
so
it was
much.
actually made into a series.
Right.
Came out last year on Amazon Prime, first Italian series, Bang Bang Baby.
Right, okay.
I wasn't happy with the title at first.
Right.
It sounded a bit pornographic.
Right.
And I thought, I don't like this, sorry, but I was, and then of course it's the song, the Bang Bang, he shot me down.
Right. I've not seen that. I'm going to watch
Nancy Sinatra. Yeah.
Right.
Well, so the plot is completely different to my book.
Right, okay.
But the relationships and the characters of my Nonna, my dad and myself is actually quite good.
Amazing.
So it's very much an 80s, if you like, all the music,
Yeah,
the styling. It's good.
Yeah.
It's obviously, I'm happy with it. Who has something like this, having done what I did.
Right.
And you've got a book, and then I've got a series. But
well, it's good you've been able to share your story though through print and through visual.
I'm just happy that people are interested enough to want to know. To be fair.
Do you know something? I don't know any Mafia Princesses, so I can now say I do. Really good to meet you, Marisa. And thank you all so much for listening and watching Criminal Connection. Can't wait to share our next guest with you. We'll see you next week.